you very much, John. And thanks to everybody that is making this possible. Gaddafi's and Ron's help during the last week has been instrumental in making this happen. I am excited to be the first virtual presenter with such an important topic on or finances during career transition. I've been advised to hold questions to the end, and I am very happy to come back to any point of the presentation as needed. Let me start right away, outlining some goals for this hour or so that we're going to share. Please do let me know if this is feeling too long of a monologue as we interact virtually, John and people in the leadership. And well, part of the screen is the video, and I address changes in the presentation, considering that we will be interacting virtually. I have a lot of text that I would not do if we were face-to-face, but considering that there might have been issues with audio or other issues, I put a lot of words in the presentation. Unfortunately, though, I can see that some of it is going to be obscured by our videos. I hope you can get the most out of it, and please, leadership, give me feedback if necessary in terms of what is being shared, what you see. The goals for the meeting that I have is to provide you guys, mature professionals, with a rigorous framework and tools to make financial decisions, and also to cover career transitions as part of the personal financial life cycle. And also, I am going to, towards the end of the talk, making some remarks specifically to women, since they handle their finances very different than men, statistically speaking. And we know that this, the financial system is not a gender neutral system, but is largely skewed to men. Following the lead of John, I want to acknowledge that we are going through a crisis today, and what we're seeing really is society is trying to strike the right balance between containment measures and outbreaks that we are seeing pop out throughout this nation and throughout the world. And I wanted to make some remarks as what does this mean for the mature professional in career transition. We have really three crises happening. We have a health crisis, and that impacts mostly those that are 50, 60, 70 plus, and those with pre-existing conditions that have their immune system compromised. And those have to be particularly careful as the worst outcomes can happen to this population. We're also undergoing a logistics crisis as we try to contain the pandemic and avoid new cases of coronavirus. And as the governments and health officials become more and more aggressive in what they do, we affect the economy, our ability to work, our ability to consume goods gets compromised, and that has had a strong response in the financial markets too. We are seeing government response trying to alleviate these issues. We have seen aggressive monetary policy responses with the federal board decreasing interest rates, and also legislative responses with Congress proposing to the Senate and eventually to the President expansion of unemployment insurance and waiving of requirements like job search that may be applicable to some of our audience here in 40 plus, and then other aspects having also considered like expansion of food security, emergency paid leave, sick leave, that this country has such low numbers on that. and also things like free coronavirus testing. I wanted to acknowledge this as this crisis unfolds. And I also wanted to say that this has dire financial consequences for the individual. Research indicates us that during the financial crisis that happened almost exactly 11 years ago, half of the dollars that people have put on their long-term savings in 401ks and other retirement accounts leaked out of those accounts. And we might see during this crisis a similar story on that. I want to reassure that unlike other financial crises that we have gone through in the past, this one has a very clear end side to it. Once the infection rate decreases, once we have a vaccine available, we do expect business as usual to come back to our lives. Not to imply, though, however, that the time from now to there, it's going to be a really bumpy ride, and not to imply that it's going to be an easy ride. We're going to see a lot of bad news coming in the next several weeks. I remember having an early conversation with Gerald, the board president, on what is the role of discussing finances in this forum. And I insisted that career transitions are not reduced to just revising and updating a resume and networking and finding the best ways to do that, which is not a trivial activity. But since our jobs provide us with a number of things in our lives, including identity, a rhythm to life, and income, there is a number of things that need to be addressed when we transition careers. Particularly in the 40+ community, our jobs are related to our identity. I hear a ring. I don't know if I have to respond to that. I'll continue. Please let me know. Particularly, I was saying, in the 40+ community, our jobs are related to our identity. And one of the things that I encourage the 40+ community to do is to try to relax that. We witness millennials and some young Gen Xers having a much more loose relationship between their identity and what they do. And I can speak more about this if necessary, but for now, I'm just going to give it as a general topic. Rhythm to our life, or jobs define our daily activities, 9 to 5, I'm going to say, or weekly activities, or monthly, or yearly activities with vacations and whatnot. And when we don't have a job, that rhythm gets largely disrupted too. And finally, largely, we work for an income. We work for two reasons: to relate to society and contribute to it, and to have an income, to be able to participate in it. And when we lose our jobs, we often lose our primary or sometimes our only source of income. And then it's worth revising our finances. It turns out that it is a great time to step back, look at our finances. And there are two things that or financial revision of our lives can do for us. And they both relate to decreasing financial vulnerability. We can decrease financial vulnerability today as we make decisions that will have an impact today, and also in the future. I'm going to be emphasizing that career transitions in the 40+ community happen later in life, and the impacts are not only strongly felt in our daily finances, but also in the finances down the road towards retirement. I also want to acknowledge that, and I am realizing that I don't have a clock here, so let me bring my clock here. Transitioning careers today is happening in a time of rapid change in several spheres: in the workplace, employees change more frequently jobs, and we are witnessing the emergence of the gig economy that I encourage the 40+ community to tap into. And as I was saying earlier, we want to have a loose relationship between what we do and our identity. It is okay to have activities just for the pure reason of getting an income, looking into using our time to have an income through website development or Airbnb. We have an extra bedroom or an extra space in our home. We are also seeing today more and more a larger and larger difference in compensation. People with executive skills tend to be higher and higher compensated than other activities. And we're transitioning careers into this broader spectrum of pay compensation. We're also a generation that has seen this transition from a more pension-based system to a more individual account system that places the responsibility on the individual on their retirement. And we are largely unprepared. Towards the end of this talk, I'm going to talk about different accounts that we hold and some very general characteristics, and I can answer questions regarding to them to the extent that you guys have interest in it and to the extent that we have time. Finally, I want to acknowledge that we're changing careers in a time when financial markets are getting more and more complex. There are more products out there, some for good, some not necessarily for good, and we have to be smarter and be more educated to discern what is good for us and what is not good for us. We also have, fortunately and unfortunately, more borrowing opportunities that involve large amounts. I'm sorry, getting a phone call. I didn't turn that off. My bad. Unfortunately, we also have access now to better and better professionals. Financial advice have transitioned from being a more sale-oriented activity to a more planning activity. Thankfully, with more and more regulations in place that often now have most professionals engage in fiduciary financial work, meaning that they are legally required to put the interest of their clients before their interest. And with all of those remarks for context, I want to say that we can benefit from the financial planning process that I summarize here in 5 steps. The financial planning process starts defining clearly, where am I today? We tend to have a loose sense of where we are, what our finances are. And unfortunately, we tend to have recurrent worries about some aspects of where am I today. I want to emphasize how simple and powerful it can be to clarify, to put down in paper, this where am I today, and I'm going to provide you with some tools, which simplicity shouldn't be disguised as impactful to our lives. If you go through this, you will see how your thinking through the days and through the weeks will be changed as you clarified where you are today. After defining that, we also want to define and be very clear on where do we want to be. To the extent that we quantitatively define goals that we can track over time, we can have clarity on why are we doing what we're doing. It can be a base on which we can revise our financial decisions day to day, month to month, year to year. We also want to ask, can I get realistically to those goals that I'm defining? And if so, how can I get there? Do I need to change my strategy? Do I need to consider things that I might not be doing? And finally, how to stay on track. I'm going to largely talk about the first two steps, as the other steps become very quickly very personal, and they go in different directions for each individual. And before addressing this first few steps of the financial planning process, I want to, guys, give you some reference as what is a good budget. The budget, what we spend today, is at the core of our financial decisions today, and that has implications on the long term. And the budget gets a bad rap, but I hope that I'm going to give you a fresh perspective on it, and also some reference for you guys to decide whether you are budgeting properly or not. I am going to make some comments that are very general, and then I'm going to make some comments more specific to specific situations. And in this more general part of this conversation, I'm going to talk about an idealized budget. Note that I don't say ideal in the sense that we all should aspire to get there, but an idealized budget. And that is in the sense that physicists refer to the word idealize, and that is stripped down to the most essential elements. You might have heard of the 50-30-20 rule or 50-20-30 rule. That is this: taking your after-tax income, the money that you have left should be distributed in an idealized manner in this way, spending 50% of that money in needs, 30% of that money in wants, and 20% of that money in savings. Needs are those things that we absolutely need to pay. Wants are things that we just do it because we want to. And then savings includes both savings for the short term, for the long term, and paying down debt. Now, as you can imagine, the lines between this different buckets are blurry and may change depending on your changing situation. Let me give some examples of things that will fall into these different buckets. In the needs, we have things like mortgage, transportation, utilities, food, basic clothing, and minimum debt payment. Even though debt payment is considered savings on this frame of reference, the minimum debt payment is something that we want to be aware of, and it's something that we must cover. Wants are things like dining out, tickets to events, charity, etc. And see that food falls both in needs and in wants. And there is an interplay on these aspects, and what may be a need today, we might want to consider a want tomorrow. And I'll acknowledge that some of us might not have a full-time job today, a full-time job that help define with the income that we have, the lifestyle that we tend to live with. But I'm just giving this as a reference, and I'll come back to that. I do want to say that during career transitions, we want to include also in needs things like training or certification. And to be a little more quantitative about this, let me see if I can move the video. Oh, I can move the video around. Haha. I didn't realize that before, sorry. To To be more quantitative on this, I brought up this table that is for somebody that lives in Washington, D.C., and I am going to refer to the example of somebody making $100,000 a year after paying the FICA taxes, that is the federal insurance taxes, that is Medicare, Medicaid, etc., and federal and state income taxes, in this case, the DC taxes. Somebody with an income of 100,000 has available per year about $71,000. And we want to break down in needs, wants, and savings to have a reference of how are we doing? Are we overspending or are we underspending in each of these different buckets? It is very useful to have this broken down, not only per year, but also per month and per week, as we can more easily identify if we are over or underspending in each of these aspects. Now, what happens when we don't have that income that help us define the lifestyle that we were paying for? We should be able to trim down our needs from 50% to about 40%, and our wants, depending on how long we are going to be unemployed, we should be able to slash out from 30% to 10% or so of what we used to have as an income, and then we can suspend our savings. And here I want to emphasize that a career transition, as I was mentioning earlier, the older we are, the more direct consequences we'll have, not only on our day-to-day finances, but also in our ability to retire on the income that we might expect to have in retirement. I also want to say that these numbers that I'm sharing with you today are thought for somebody that lives in a single household income. But what if we are in a two-income household? Well, there are two possibilities. That one of the incomes is way larger than the other, so there is a breadwinner. And in that case, the second income should only go to wants and to boost our savings. And if both incomes are comparable in magnitude, we don't want to make the mistake to commit half of that combined income, meaning the entire income of one of the members of the couple, to our needs. We want one income to be mostly dedicated to wants and savings, such that if we miss one of those incomes, we're not in what they call the two-income trap. That requires that both members of the couple have to work for the family to function. To enjoy the strengths of the family, we should have flexibility, and our finances should allow for that flexibility of only one member working. Now, I want to say that I am going to share some forms and parts of some forms that I can make available to you if you want to, that have been developed at Mary's house, where I chair the financial planning program. This is for elder LGBTQ adults that are a particularly vulnerable population for a number of reasons, but have developed wonderful tools that I am bringing and making available to you today. To define where we are at today, we want to seed and establish our net worth. And that is, we want to add our assets and subtract the liabilities that our name is in. Any debt that has our name is our liability. Establishing our net worth and doing that regularly, annually, ideally, can help us in a number of ways. It can help track the progress towards our goals, and I'll talk about goals in a second. It can help us to estimate our insurance needs. Insurance is sadly the most oversold product in the financial industry. and many people is overinsured, but also many people is underinsured, exposing themselves to financial vulnerability that we do not want to have. We do want to have conversations with insurance agents and have a good estimate of what insurance should we have, and clarity in its cost. Also, establishing our net worth can help us to formulate our estate plan. And as we become older and older, there is often a larger need for doing that. And the exercise, when it comes to it, is quite simple. But again, as I was saying earlier, not because of that less powerful. We do want to sit and write down. I love doing that in a piece of paper. There is something about the physicality of it that makes it real. We want to write down all our assets, cash accounts, checking accounts, savings accounts, any investments that we may have, CDs, bonds, stocks, mutual funds, annuities, IRAs, 401ks, all of those investment accounts. We want to write them down, write down their current market value. And of course, in this last couple of weeks, if you are long-term investors and are making good choices on your investments, you should see a large swing in value in the last couple of weeks. If you are not, you're probably missing out in the benefits of investing in the market for the long run. You also want to write down the tangible property that you own, your primary residence, if there is any other real estate, your car, collectibles, and others. And you also want to take an honest look at your liabilities and write down all your debt, from credit card, any medical debt, to all of the mortgages that you might hold, any home equity lines of credit, and any other money that you owe for your car, any remaining student debt, personal debt, etc. We want to get that number. It is so powerful to get that number written down. It not only removes a lot of the noise in our worrying mind, it also allows us for clear thinking ahead once we have this established. At the same time, establishing our net worth, we want to establish our budget. We want to use a resource like this one or other resources. There are plenty of resources online, writing down all of the expenses we have. People often come with surprises when they commit to this process and starts doing this. Write all our fixed expenses and variable expenses, and have a sense of from our income, what excess income are we having over time, or what shortfall we're having over time. And that, of course, helps for that person changing careers to estimate how much deficit of money we're going to have over time. And we want to write these budgets on a monthly basis, but also, I think I have that in the next slide, yes, on a quarterly and semi-annual basis, as it might take 4 or 6 months or more to get a job. Here, let me say, we are, as I was saying earlier, in a health crisis. We are more and more asked to be isolated in our homes. And it seems that we're going to be being asked that more and more strongly as time goes by, it looks like. But we're also in a financial crisis, and that financial crisis is having strong repercussions in large and small businesses. Some large businesses have announced early on, a couple of weeks ago, hiring freezes. Of course, that happened first in the airline industry. But we expect these issues to have a ripple effect in businesses of all sizes, as I was saying, we must prepare ourselves for possibly a longer career transition. And on that, we want to write these numbers in your budget. We want to reduce our financial vulnerability by adding clarity to it, not only in a monthly base, but also for the next quarter or the next 6 months. We want to have clarity on how our finances are going to play out over time. And once we have written all our expenses down, we want to classify them on necessary, discretionary, and savings, and see how we can make our budget work. Both in terms of the ideal budget, if there is an income in your household, or in a budget for those people that are not having a large source of income relative to the lifestyle today. And as we have a little more time, hopefully, during our career transition, a great exercise to do is to build your financial inventory. And that is not only recording in your net worth how much is in your checking account or in your savings accounts, in your 401k, but also writing down where in what banking institution those accounts are, account numbers, beneficiaries, and so on and so forth. The same for this slide referred, the first slide referred to banking, the second slide referred to investment accounts, the third slide refers to tangible property, a slide for liabilities, and also a slide for insurance. We want to have awareness of how insured we are. We need to be well insured, as I was saying earlier, not over-insured, but not under-insured either. They both expose us to financial vulnerability. And we also want to write our goals. Once we have defined where we are at financially, then we can ask, well, where do I want to be? How far of a distance I have between these two things? We might be closer to retirement than we might initially thought, or farther from it. And we might have a need to aggressively generate an income and reduce our expenses. We want to write the concept of our goal, the amount of money that is involved, and have an honest calculation of how much time it's that gonna take me to achieve. I list here typical goals for ourselves, and thinking also in our family and our society. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to have an emergency fund. And of course, you don't need to hear this lesson. You are also very well aware of how important it is to have that built up. And it's if that is not in place, it should be one of the first goals that we have among many other goals that you can read here. Let me see how I'm doing with time. I'm gonna, in the interest of time, I won't be discussing each of them. I'll just gonna move forward. For the mature professional in career transition, a goal should be having a budget for the next, as I was saying, 4-6 months and up to a year. As I was saying, it might take us longer to get a job these days in particular. And we also want, and that is for the short term, and in the longer term, we want to understand the repercussions of not only not having savings, but possibly tapping in our savings into our retirement monthly spending. The lifestyle that we can have in retirement is going to depend on how much Social Security we can access, what sources of income we might have in retirement from pensions or second homes, and how much we have amassed in our investment portfolios, how well we invested over time. And on that, let me put this in the context of the life cycle of from the personal finance perspective. You see in the vertical axis income, and in the horizontal axis age. That I am blocking with my video, but I think that is just me. Yes. From 10 and 20 years to 70 plus. In the first time of our life, we do not have an income in principle. We are being educated, and eventually we enter the workforce, and we separate the years in which we start saving, we start earning money as in early saving years, from those that we call late saving years, in which in principle we want to be more aggressive if needed, heading to retirement. And then retirement, early retirement and late retirement. People tend to be more active in early retirement, doing things like traveling around the world, or having energy to take a second career, go back to school, etc. And then late retirement, where their activity decreases. And let me here bring up a couple of things that happen through our financial lives to put career transitions in that context. As we start forming families, we begin to have insurance planning needs, and as our income start surpassing the needs to pay our bills, we can get access to investment planning. Most people encounter this first through their workplace, through a 401k or the TSP, but those are not the only ways that we can save for the future, and I'll say a couple of words on that in a bit. And as our financial lives become more and more complex, we also want to start considering tax planning, as there is a number of ways that our tax liabilities can be managed with the help of professionals on that. And finally, as our states grow, we start having the need of doing state planning. The career transition for mature professionals happens later in life, when all of these things are around, and all of these things have to be potentially considered for a successful career transition. And here by success, I not only mean just get a job, but also get a job that is going to allow you to retire the way you want to. And as we head to retirement, I want to say that there are two broad questions that we want to target, and that is, how much money do I really need to retire, and where is my income going to come from? Today, about 40% of the income of retirees come from Social Security, and we want to have awareness of the estimate of the benefits that, given the contributions that we have had over the years, SSA has for us. They used to send you a statement every so often, but now we have to be proactive and go to the website. If you haven't done that recently, I invite you to go to that website and see how much you may expect to have in income from Social Security once you start getting that benefit. Also, I want to say that emergency cash is something that we want to have, and that is fundamentally different when we are working and when we are retired. While people in their working years are encouraged to get 3 to 6 months worth of spending, and here, that's why it is important to write down those budgets. How much, what is my spending, the needs that I have for spending. while the working professional can get away with 3 to 6 months of saving that, as we transition to retirement, we want to increase those emergency cash funds to 1 to 2 years worth of spending. And that is because as we transition to depend more and more from our portfolios, we want to avoid to have to sell investments when they are value low as today. And we do know from history that downturns like the one that we're going through today tend to last on average 1.5 years, but they can last up to 2 years or so. And having emergency funds in place like this strengthens our ability to ride those market downturns. And here, I do want to say a few words about the universe of accounts that we have access to in investing. And first, I want to say a few words about women. Women, we know from statistics, tend to not invest compared to men. There is a large deficit on financial education for everybody. It's not like women are less educated on finances than men. Yet we see more men investing. We do know that as we increase financial education, people tend to use better the financial tools that are available to them. And those with less financial education tend to rely more on friends and family for input. However, that is problematic because our friends and family that belongs to the same circles where we are at tend to have the same kind of information that we have. And those that have more information tend to use more professionals to their advantage. I want to tell women that you girls live longer. More often than not, you become a widow you become a widow, or you manage your own finances at some point, whether by choice or by circumstance. And about 70%, I want to share with you, of women that had their finances being managed by their partners come to a rude awakening on the state of their finances. They didn't have an understanding of where they were at. I want to encourage women to take control of their finances. And I want to acknowledge that the system is not gender neutral, it's largely skewed for men, is doing by men. And I don't want to bash men on this. This is the result of the societies in which we live. We get socialized differently. So I wanted to say a few words on the basics of the accounts that you may have. The most basic account that you may have to invest for the future is what we call a taxable account. And that is an account where you pay taxes on the earnings that you make. For most people, those earnings are taxed at a 15% rate. Now, while this is available for everybody, this is often the last kind of account that people hear about, because often the first encounter with investment accounts that people have is through the employer that they have. So people learn first more often about tax advantage accounts, either employer sponsor, 401ks, 403bs, 457s, the TSP, or individual sponsor, the individual retirement accounts, traditional IRAs, Roth IRA, simplify employee pension plans, SEPs, IRAs for those that are self-employed. In any of these accounts, whether taxable account or a tax advantaged account, what you do is own either stocks, bonds, a mixture of them, or a basket of them in the form of funds. And funds can be either mutual funds or index funds. And I'm not talking here, although there is another category, that are hedge funds. But those are not the kinds of products that we think of for our retirement, which I think is the topic here. Mutual funds are characterized by having a team of managers that make investment decisions for you as what to sell, what to buy, the monitoring of the stocks and bonds that they owe, and therefore you owe. And index funds don't have that, and therefore don't have that layer of cost that we all are paying in owning these accounts. Index funds passively follow an index and tend to be way cheaper than mutual funds. And I do want to say a few words about risk. Today, for those of you that have checked the balance in your retirement accounts and your taxable accounts, you've seen, I hope, a large drop in the value. And I say I hope because the only way that you do not see that drop is by having very quote unquote safe investments. Those are designed not to see oscillations on that. And I want to say a few words about that and risk. And let me start by saying that the planning that comes with it comes back to very simple math. It comes down to a product, an addition, and an exponential. And that is the future value of our money depends on the current value of your money, often referred as principal, how much growth rate we expect to happen over time, and how much time we have the money invested, such that somebody investing $10,000 in principal at an 8% rate of growth that starts savings at age 55 may expect to have a little more than $20,000 at age 65. If you start way earlier, at age 25, you can expect to have way more money. But we cannot control time. And for the 40+ community, we are getting closer and closer to retirement. However, I want to make the point that we are living longer and longer, and our planning should include more and more years. If you are 60 today, and we're planning for your 90s, that is 30 years or more of planning. And what we do in financial planning is decide what expected rate of return you should have. And there is a close relationship between the rate of return that you get and the risk that you assume. And risk here, defined in the context of well-balanced portfolios, has to do with the variability of the value of your account day to day and year to year, such that those that are seeing today the value of their portfolios decrease substantially do expect to have a larger return over a meaningful period of time when we average it. Stocks tend to be way more quote unquote risky in the sense of changing value day to day and year to year, as I was saying, than bonds, and definitely than cash that do not oscillate in value at all. Here, I have plotted for you the returns of the largest 500 companies in the US over time from 1960 to last year in blue. And you can see the large variability on the returns on the stocks, and that's why they are called risky. And you can also see the return of bonds in orange that are way smaller in magnitude, but with way less variability year to year. And that's what they are considered safer investments. Now, when instead of plotting just the yearly return, and let me say this, in some years, like in 2008 and possibly 2020, we see a dramatic drop in the value of those investments. And I want to tell you, to bring your attention to how uncorrelated that is to the next year and the following years. And that is when we take the perspective of year to year. But when we take the accumulation over the last 30 years, this is how stock returns in blue compare to bond returns in orange. Being stocks consider way more risky investments than bonds. And I wanted to share these basic aspects of risks to convey that a riskier investment, the way we use that word, is not necessarily a bad thing or only for those that have an appetite for risk in the larger sense of the word. And I want that message to be delivered particularly to women that tend not to invest from the perspective of thinking that they are risk averse. I believe to the extent that we understand better risk, we can make better investment decisions for your particular situation. And that's what I wanted to share in this last part of the talk. And I want to leave it here with the 5 steps of the financial planning process. And with that, I conclude this talk. Thank you, John. I want to acknowledge that I've been getting some chat messages.
Oh, okay.
With requests to share some information share on the slides, but 40 Plus is sharing all of the slides with the attendees, so people will have that information. And I've been also asked to share some of the forms that I refer to. And for those people that want that, I can email the forms to them. I'll write my email on the chat so they can reach out to me on email. I'm gonna send my personal email as these forms maybe either from Mary's house or there may be some information from Edward Jones. Mary's house is a nonprofit, and Edward Jones is the company that I work at.
All right, and really quickly, Sergio, I know you've been following COVID-19 really closely, and you were one of the people who first told us, hey, we got to get on top of this and start a plan early. How long do you think that we should be preparing for? Would you say at least 3 months to 6 months that this could be in isolation, that we need to be, starting to conserve things early on to make it through?
Yeah, John, there is a large uncertainty around that because we don't have hard numbers on how contagious this virus is. As information comes, as things happen, it seems that it's more contagious than we originally thought. In the US, we have the added problem that there is no testing widely available. So we don't know how much, they call it community contagious, has happened. We might be in a very bad shape. To the extent that that is true, and we see a large number of people infected, the potential for more infections is larger and larger. Our only reference is China now, that took very aggressive measures very early on, prohibiting people leaving their homes almost from very close to day one, and it took them 3 months. Today we see Chinese businesses opening. Apple, for example, has opened their stores, I think, over the weekend back in China, at the same time that they just started closing them in the US. So to answer your question, it took China 3 months with very aggressive measures. We haven't had those aggressive measures here. And it is hard to strike the right balance. The more aggressive the measures are, the faster we recover.
Right.
So to the extent that we haven't addressed this contagious happening, it will take us longer. But at the same time, we are making this information, we are reacting to this information day by day. In the last several days, we've seen a rapid increase and tightening of measures, being more and more worrisome, I guess, paralyzing more and more economic activity. We should receive this as good news in the sense that the more we slow down the interaction between people, the shorter we will have to be doing this. But yeah, John, so this is what I've followed closely the virus, yes. And now my personal opinion is that, yes, I think we should brace for 4 to 6 months.
Yeah, I know I personally am in preparing for 6 months. Just because of what you said with the way the U.S. economy is, we're much freer, we're used to our freedom. People are going to be slower to react. We're not going to have the same, measures enforced upon us that were enforced in China. So, Sergio, are you getting? I'm not getting a lot of questions. Are there questions from the people in the audience? Please, again, you move your cursor down to the bottom. There should be a chat, a row of questions that come up. Sergio, are they sending them to you personally?
I've been getting messages asking to share information that I will email, but not questions as clarification or that will invite me to further elaborate.
All right. Well, we have a few minutes. We'll let people think about questions, and in the meantime, you and I will chat for a couple of minutes. One of the things that I look back, and I'm a little bit older than you, so I've been trading a little bit longer. But should we look at SARS incidents and try to take some measures from there as to what to do with our portfolios during this time?
Yes, history is the element that we rely on. And while this is becoming more pronounced than what we saw in SARS and with the swine flu and H1N1, some of the broader characteristics are the same, meaning it's a virus. We are developing a vaccine for it.
Right.
We see an end of this craziness. It is going to happen. Now, how much affected or productive structures are going to be is it's up for question. And we're going to continue to see volatility in the markets as companies get in financial distress and as governments provide financial relief. The federal board announced a week and a half ago that lowered the interest rates, and there was a spike of home refinancing. And over the weekend, just last evening, they announced that they brought them down to 0, which is a drastic measure.
Well, it's very drastic.
Sadly, the markets fell further down today after that announcement. I think they made that announcement on Sunday evening, hoping that the markets were going to recover early this week, but we're seeing the opposite. And the issue is that we don't have a problem with the liquidity. This monetary policy decision of lowering the interest rates helps the economy to the extent that it makes cheap money available. The cost of our money for everybody, for banks and for us personally, is the interest that we pay on them, on the money that we borrow. And the lower the interest that we have to pay on the money that we borrow, the cheaper it is, and the more incentivized we are to borrow money and go about our business. I am frankly surprised with Jay Powell's decision of lowering the interest rates, because we don't have a problem with the liquidity. Financial institutions are have a strong position. They are not struggling to get money. Yet it's one of the few levers that they have to incentivize the economy, and that's what they've reacted with, and it's not helping.
It's not, and I think it's not because really the markets don't respond well to uncertainty, and that's really the driver I think that we're seeing in the markets right now, is all the uncertainty that's in there.
John, if it's okay, let me interrupt this. There is a question.
Oh, good.
Joseph asked, I think, to everyone, to develop a realistic budget, should we look back at more than 1 year of expenses, or can we limit our view to 6 months or a year? And John might have some comments on this.
I always go back 2 or 3 years, because there's always things, one-time expenses that come in that get involved in this, and you want to normalize it as much as possible. But also, I think it's probably the best thing to do, Josephine, is to start cutting aggressively fast. And I think that we're going to start seeing a lot of corporations do that, because really it's going to be about cash preservation at this point. So I would go back 3 years if you have that information. Sergio, your thoughts?
Yes. Having that background of a longer period of time gives us a more realistic picture of it. Now, we also have to look forward. What is a lifestyle that we can define with the circumstances that we have in the face of the resources that we have available? If we have lost our main source of income or main job, the way we spend money in the past may not be necessarily how we're going to spend money in the future for our budget. And what I want to emphasize is we want to have a working budget for a defined period of time. If we don't get a job in 4 months, we do want to have a working budget for 6 months. And if we don't get a job in 6 months, we want to have a working budget for even further. We want to know where that money is going to come from and how we're going to be spending money in that situation. To the extent that we do that exercise, I love when they say doing a budget is really telling the money where to go. To the extent that we do a budget, we are going to remove a layer of worry, a layer of time, figuring it out as we go. We can see.
Right. Being emotional and reacting on the moment is probably the worst thing that you can do at this point. You have to take a longer perspective of it. But one of the things I would be doing if you're unemployed at this point is figuring out how long your cash will last. That's one of the first exercise I recommend to people, is how long will your cash last? Because you really need to know. And if it's not at like a 6-month period, then you really need to start cutting aggressively, because I can see this lasting, especially the market volatility lasting a while. And we're going to have up and downs. We're going to have hopefully we will come out with a vaccine soon, but you never know. I mean, testing for vaccines takes a while.
Correct. There is testing to make sure that we have an adequate vaccine, and then distribution. We are several million people, and producing a vaccine at that scale also takes time. So it's going to be several months on that.
Josephine, does that answer your question? All right. I know it's probably not the answer you wanted to hear. Okay, very good. Any other questions that we have? We have about 2 more minutes before we call it quits. Well, I want to first of all, Sergio, thank you so much for being the absolute first. I mean, there's so much involved in pulling today off, and I want to thank you for being the first person. Sergio has also been a volunteer for how long has it been? A year?
Probably, yeah, I think a year.
I think it's coming up on your first anniversary of being a volunteer 40 plus, and we're very happy to have you here.